The top stories: Prime Minister Abiy urges newly appointed ministers to battle corruption and begging. And the newly formed cabinet includes 3 competing political party leaders. Hello and many thanks for joining us. You're watching Addis News Hour. With the news, I'm Tabitha John. Do stay with us. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed urged the newly appointed ministers to fight corruption and appealing to aid. The parliament approved appointments of 22 ministerial-level cabinet members at the first special session of the 6th parliament. Goshu Meliso has the details.
The House of People's Representatives on Wednesday approved a new cabinet proposed by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed for 5-year term. Addressing members of the parliament, Abiy Ahmed urged newly appointed ministers to fight corruption and appealing aid.
የሚቀጥለው መንግስት የካቢኔ አባላት የሆናችሁ ሚኒስትሮች ዋና ተልዕኳችሁ አርጋችሁ ብትወስዱ ብዬ ማነሳው
I would like to urge cabinet members of ministers to focus on eradicating corruption and begging for aid in your 5-year term. With deep-rooted corruption and aid dependency, Ethiopia cannot ensure its development and move forward. I kindly ask you, all cabinet members, to plan self-sufficient strategy and avoid aid dependency. You appointed ministers, you must work hard to wipe out the addiction of thefts and begging.
Abiy also reiterated that competing political parties and ruling members of the government work closely with open-minded approach to achieve the national goal.
ተፎካካሪ ፓርቲ አመራሮች ወደ ካቢኔ አባል እያስገባናችሁ ስለሆነ በተከበረው ምክር ቤት ፊት ላሳስባችሁ የምፈልገው ነገር
Competing political parties who are included in the new cabinet need to work hand in hand to achieve the national goal. Leading and opposing the institution are completely different ideas. Criticizing the institution from outside is very easy unless you are involved in it. When you join the institution, there are various challenges. Leading the institution is not welcoming and not as easy as a pancake. You competing political parties, you have double responsibility and work with the government to be effective. It is difficult to form coalition governments in Ethiopia, so that you have to exercise to entertain diversity of thought. I kindly urge you to demonstrate as we can work together to the generation to come.
የሚፈጠርበት የመጀመሪያው መድረክ ስለሆነ ኃላፊነታችን ድርብ ነው ብላችሁ የምታዩ እንድትሆኑ
According to the Prime Minister, the nomination considers religious and gender equation, educational background, experience, efficiency as well as devotion of the nominees.
Ethiopians have got their ministerial cabinet comprised of 22 ministers today. Reading brief portfolios of the appointees, Prime Minister Abiy has unveiled his ministers to the parliamentarians. More on this as scholar Demeka Hachiso speaks to us over the phone. Welcome, Dr. Demeka. It's so good to have you.
Thank you.
So how did you find the appointment of the ministers? Do you like the choice? I mean, we have seen a couple of new faces, for example, from contesting political parties. Do you like the choice?
Yeah, of course, you know, in the Ethiopian history, for the very first time, a kind of new coalition government was formed. In other countries so far, the experience is quite different because to form a coalition government, opposition political parties have to win at least some election and then they have to enter to political bargaining process. But the Prosperity Party for the very first time to encourage national unity and basically to strengthen the nation building process for those political parties who didn't even win a single seat in the parliament. A new form of coalition government was formed, and so this is truly encouraging, and probably it laid down a new foundational base for new democratic movement in the Ethiopian history. Not only in Ethiopia, but also it could be taken as a good example in Africa as well as in the world, because I didn't hear such kind of, experience from Africa or from other parts of the world. Therefore, I think Ethiopia has been coming up with a new democratic horizon, basically, to be cited as a very good example of, initiating dialogue, initiating, cooperative work between incumbent political party and opposition political parties. Therefore, whatever the individual characteristic may be, but for the sake of national consensus and for nation building, this is a new move and a new chapter. Of course, the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed truly promised, but what we have witnessed today in the Parliament is much more than even his promises. Therefore, a true rhetoric as well as practice was implemented. So the Prosperity Party has been doing its level best, and this is truly exemplary in my opinion.
Very good. Have you observed any drawbacks, for instance, in this election process?
We cannot say that the election process was perfect, but as compared to the previous election process, it also laid down another new foundational basis, because in the very first time in the Ethiopian history, the National Electoral Board fully mandated and exercised its power, and it regulated, it managed, it led, the entire election process. Therefore, it was the very first chapter in Ethiopian history for a National Election Board to fully control all the political parties, but including the incumbent political parties, to fairly contest election. The other interesting dimension of this election was that, of course, previously there was a lot of chaos, particularly at the time of election and the post-election period. A lot of chaos has been happening in Ethiopian history, but now it was very peaceful, because the expectation of the world was quite different. And every country, particularly from advanced industrial countries, were expecting some kind of violence and uncontrollable, probably post-election processes. But almost all political parties truly were working for the continuity of the nation. Therefore, the post-election, the election, and the pre-election process was quite smooth. It was free from any kind of violence and any kind of false accusation. Of course, some few instant cases were taken to the court, and of course that was quite democratic. So, in many aspects, of course, in terms of voters turnout also, because the National Electoral Board also extended, the election time, and people were, voting, casting their ballots to the midnight. That was quite encouraging democratic process. So even in the election process, for the very first time in the Ethiopian history again, the incumbent political party was encouraging and expecting people to vote for opposition political parties. But that did not happen, because people were very much inspired by the programs of the Prosperity Party. And this also is another new chapter in the history of Ethiopian election. I think it is quite incomparably better, but not perfect election, of course. So it clearly indicates that we are in a right track for democracy.
My final question for you, Dr. Demeke, is what do you think will be the biggest challenges to the Prime Minister and his newly formed cabinet?
Of course, Ethiopia, as compared to many advanced capitalist countries, is quite different, because we are a diverse society. We are diverse in terms of culture, ethnicity, language, geography, and the gender issue is there. And I'm also one of the members of the parliament, and I was witnessing the challenge that the Prime Minister encountered. So he has to maintain all these balances, geographic balance, religious balance, ethnic balance, professional balance, experience, and the interest of the new cabinet members. So all these issues have to be taken, and it's definitely posed some kind of critical challenge for Prime Minister, at least, to make choices people to be member of the new cabinet. And the other challenge probably ahead of time is that the expectation of the people is quite high, because people truly trusted the program of Prosperity Party, and that has to be truly translated to the action. Therefore, work ahead of time, ahead of this cabinet of ministers is quite large, and the commitment of the Prime Minister as well as the government is quite encouraging, because the intention, the number one intention of the government is creating corruption-free government cabinet as well as fighting poverty to the maximum level possible. So these are agendas, issues prioritized. Of course, there is the issue of justice, equality. A lot of works are ahead, and now Ethiopian people are suffering inflation problem, unemployment challenges are there. Therefore, all this needs some kind of revision of microeconomic policies. So every minister, as a minister, as well as in terms of collective responsibility, they have to assume a lot of tasks, and they have to, of course, prepare themselves to implement the programs in practical way.
All right, Dr. Dameka Hachiso, a scholar as well as a parliamentarian, thank you very much for your insights. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
The newly formed cabinet has included 3 competing political party leaders at the helm of 3 ministries. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed said the decision comes after extensive deliberations and careful study in order to create a more inclusive and competent team. Shifarao Lako takes it from here.
The House of People's Representatives Wednesday approved the nomination of ministerial-level cabinet members, including reappointment of Dameka Mekonnen as the Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister. Apart from members of the Prosperity Party, 3 contending parties' leaders have been included as cabinet members from Ethiopian Citizens for Social Justice, National Movement of Amhara, and Oromo Liberation Front, Professor Birhanu Nega, Bellete Molla, and Kajela Merdasa, as Education, Innovation and Technology, as well as Culture and Sports Ministers, respectively. The objective of this move is to demonstrate possibility of working together for national interest despite political differences, as it is a new trend in Ethiopia, Abiy said during the occasion. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed also says the decision comes after extensive deliberations and careful study in order to create a more inclusive and competent team.
መንግስት የፐርፌክቶች ስብስብ አይደለም ማገልገል የሚፈልጉ ሰዎች ስብስብ ነው
The government is not filled with perfect collections, it is rather a collection of individuals committed to serving the nation. So, training and making them qualified is primarily expected of this House. We arrived at this decision after a great deal of efforts and time. We will also do our best to include other competent individuals to serve as state ministers as part of the effort being exerted to make the team stronger.
The Premier also underlined that Ethiopia is larger than differences between the incumbent and the opposition parties.
ተፎካካሪን በሚመለከት መላው የኢትዮጵያ ሕዝብ እንዲገነዘብ የምንፈልገው ነገር ለተቃዋሚ ፓርቲ
Concerning contending parties, what I would like the whole people of Ethiopia to recognize is that the positions we secured for opposition parties are not just nominal, then for the sake of including them in the ministerial portfolio. Take, for instance, the post for the chair of the National Movement of Amhara. It is one of the vital 5 pillars of our 10-year plan. It comes out of conviction that they can serve the country completely, and I am confident that they will succeed short up by our support.
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed has called on everyone to contribute share to the success of Ethiopia's visions in the coming 5 years, including the eradication of corruption and poverty.
The House of People's Representatives has endorsed draft proclamation on mandates of executive bodies. The House held its first special session today. Haptamu Ashagri has more.
የኢትዮጵያ ፌደራላዊ ዲሞክራሲያዊ ሪፐብሊክ ስድስተኛው የሕዝብ ተወካዮች ምክር ቤት
The House of People's Representatives has endorsed draft proclamation on mandates of executive bodies and approving ministerial appointments. Members of the parliament raised various questions and suggestions on the draft proclamation.
ኢትዮጵያ ብሮድካስት ኮርፖሬሽን ኢትዮጵያ ዜና አገልግሎትና ኢትዮጵያን ፕሬስ ድርጅት
There are unclear concerns about this proclamation, questioning democratic institutions' accountabilities. The previous proclamation indicated media organizations like EBC, Ethiopian News Agency, and Ethiopian Press Agency were governed by the House of People's Representatives. But this draft proclamation does not clearly state whom these institutions belong to. It does not also show whether it supports the previous proclamation or not. Can we have clarification on that?
አንዱ ከተቀመጠው የተጠያቂነት የማስፈን
This proclamation states ensuring accountability is a key factor. However, it doesn't demonstrate a clear picture on how to ensuring it practically. The proclamation also puts direction how to operate it. I think it is better that every institution states how to ensure accountability. Accordingly, can we learn a report evaluation system of every institution?
Responding to questions raised by MEPs, Fitsum Asefa, who is Minister of Plan and Development, said every critical concern is accounted under the proclamation.
ግን በስትራቴጂ እንደ ፖሊሲ ሊቀመጡ የሚችሉ በእቅድ ሊያዙ የሚችሉ ሐሳቦች
We are unable to mention some concerns as a part of this proclamation, but we can put down in showing concerns as a means of strategy and policy. We are well noted those concerns effectively. Major concerns are clearly written under the endorsed proclamation.
According to Fitsum, some democratic institutions which are not mentioned in the Constitution are not a part of government executive bodies but continued as sub-institutions.
በህገ መንግስት የተጠቀሱ ተቋማት ወይም ሪኳየር የተደረጉ ተቋማት በአጠቃላይ
Some democratic institutions mentioned by the Constitution are accountable to the House of People Representatives. We are doing this for the better achievement of the institutions. Our policy direction is clearly explained. This is hard fact too. Unmentioned institutions like EBC are not a part of this proclamation because it is not a part of executive branch. But this institution named under the sub-institution branch, thus without ministry offices, this democratic institution will remain to be under sub-institutions.
Fitsum remarked the newly endorsed proclamation helps to cement check and balance activities of executive bodies across the country.
Welcome back. According to a leaked UN internal communication from last Saturday, its humanitarian staff in Shire, Tigray, know of or at least have heard reports of human rights abuses within the areas they serve in Tigray and seem to be indifferent to responding and acting on them. What's being told to a group of UN workers and cluster partners is starkly different at times to how the OCHA is publicly reporting the situation. Unconfirmed reports indicate that mandatory recruitment have been ongoing in the past few days, coinciding with the increasing tensions and challenges in and around TPLF-controlled areas in the state of Amhara. Recently, the world body is losing out on Ethiopia, given its slanted view of the TPLF and the situation on the ground. Kasahun Chani takes an in-depth look at the situation in the following reportage.
The double standard going on at the global body wants us to unpack a lot here. But what stands out most of all is how there is no indication and email that the United Nations manager wants to investigate further to confirm or that officials will ask TPLF leaders to cease and desist forcing Tigrayans to fight for a terrorist group. Ethiopia kicked out 7 United Nations senior officials it declared persona non grata, and which it accuses of undermining security operations, spreading disinformation and collaboration with the TPLF. Despite protests by the United Nations and its Western allies, sources confirmed months ago, and in August, the senior United Nations officials have harassed Ethiopian workers, helped helped the TPLF to sabotage national exams in Mekelle and worked to misrepresent the United Nations' own discussion of how to respond to sexual assault causes during the conflict. It's reasonable to ask the United States and its public advocates how that the United Nations keep walking in Tigray, knowing that Tigrayan residents, including children, are being forced to go to war. A United Nations official openly suggested in an email to colleagues that ordinary Tigrayans are being forced to fight over challenges in TPLF-controlled regions of Amhara, a whole of euphemistic way of saying the locals are fighting back and giving us a window on how desperate TPLF forces are needing to drag their own people to the battle lines. And what action is the United Nations taking to persuade TPLF soldiers and their officers to stop doing this dangerous practice? None is given. All partners please refrain from attending and taking pictures or videos of any recruitment-related events. This is quite revealing. Why must partners and United Nations staff even need to be told to stay clear and not capture any photo or video evidence of recruitment-related events? Why would they attend and be fraternizing with new recruits at all? Instructing staff not to take any photos or videos of recruiting events is a damage control effort that speaks more to protecting the TPLF's image than the physical safety of the United Nations workers. The United Nations officials talked of some people being arrested in Tigray for allegedly spying for the Ethiopian forces and that their phones were confiscated. But would the United Nations like to weigh in on what happened to these arrested individuals? Did staff bother to find out their names and how and where they are being detained? How about if they are still alive? Given that during the Meles Zenawi era of TPLF rule, torture conducted right in downtown buildings in Addis was commonplace. What are United Nations staff doing to further investigate and ensure that these arrested individuals are having their rights protected? The Ethiopian Disaster Risk Management Commission admits some United Nations officials approved aid items to Tigray, but the aid items were denied at checkpoints. Who then would deny them? Well, the Federal Army is no longer in control of the region after it left during the unilateral ceasefire, and it certainly wasn't around at the time this email was written, October 2. So the only force that could prevent transited the TPLF. Moreover, in keeping with the flood of photo or video evidence on social media, the email gives us a clear confirmation that the United Nations fleet of vehicles are being misused by the TPLF, contrary to United Nations Aid Chief Martin Griffiths trying to blame the more than 400 disappearing trucks on the Ethiopian government.
Some renowned political and business personalities have called on the new government to swiftly prioritize ensuring peace and stability in Ethiopia. They also urged the incumbent to encourage the private sector and address key economic challenges. Demis Mekria reports.
Abiy Ahmed Ali, በዛሬው ዕለት በሕዝብ ተወካዮች ምክር ቤት
Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed was sworn in to lead Ethiopia for the coming 5 years after Prosperity Party won landslide election victory in June. Prime Minister Abiy forms his new government amid several challenges Ethiopia is grappling with, including the crisis in the northern part of Ethiopia. Some renowned personalities approached by TV say the new government will have to deal with a number of urgent assignments, mostly ensuring peace and stability as key priorities.
Definitely the priority should be peace, because we all know what is going on in the northern part of our country. And what we need is, and what we need dearly is peace. Because if we cannot sustain peace, then we cannot think of development or prosperity. So the first priority should be peace. So we have to prioritize peace, and that is the only way we can adjust our ways, and we can achieve what we need to achieve as well. So I do agree that peace is at the top list of our priority.
Many Ethiopians are optimistic that Abiy's new government will substantially change the country's way forward for the better. Those who gave comment to ETV English have shared the optimism, expressing their conviction that the new government will address some of the pressing economic problems of the nation.
You know, job creation is a very important tool for growing Ethiopia. It is a good time and opportunity to encourage the private sector, to encourage private businesses, to increase the performance of ease of doing business, which the Ethiopian government has already embarked on various reforms to carry these endeavors out. And with this government, I'm sure these endeavors will be further expedited, and I'm sure that they will be successful in creating a job for every Ethiopian in the coming years.
Our government must be focused especially on a young generation. Young generation, they have more creativity, and they have a power, and they have energy to do everything, to change this country. So they must have, young generation must have on job creation, and more people, especially on like me, business people. In personally, I invest on idea. So more businessmen, they must invest on idea and create job opportunity for our young people.
Accepting the appointment as a prime minister, Abiy has pledged to address key priorities.